Week 2 is officially wrapped up, and now we are heading into Week 3 of fantasy football. It's time to go out and make our waiver claims, and today I got you guys covered with everything on the waiver wire, talking about players that should be rostered, my top 10 running back / wide receiver odds of the week, my 3 favorite streams at the quarterback, tight end, and DST positions this week, as well as 5 players I view as droppable in fantasy at this current point. But let's waste no more time and let's go to the players that should be rostered in your league. They are rostered above 50% of leagues, but if they are available in your league, they are worthy of a spot on today's video. We'll start off with Harold Fan and tight end of the Cleveland Browns. Again, over the 50% threshold, but he is the tight end 8 in fantasy through 2 weeks and has 14 targets commanded as a rookie tight end. He's ran 91% of the Cleveland Browns routes, and he played over 50% of his snaps from the slot. In my opinion with Harold Fan, and based off what he's shown in the first 2 games, he needs to be rostered in every single league. Next up, Caleb Williams, quarterback of the Chicago Bears. He's currently the quarterback 10 in fantasy and has 21 points per game through these first 2 weeks, 85 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown in those 2 games. Now he gets a great game environment at home, 425 kickoff, going up against my Dallas Cowboys in a game that has a 49.5 over-under. Chicago is implied for over 24 points this week. We saw what Russell Wilson did to the Cowboys last week, and the fact that Caleb Williams is still available in some leagues, view him as a back-end quarterback 1 for the rest of the season and a mid-quarterback 1 this week given the matchup against Dallas. Next up, Cam Scadaboo, running back of the New York Giants. He led the team in snaps at 52%, had 100% of the team's short down carries, and led the backfield in overall carries, 11 carries to Tyrone Tracy's 5 in the game against Dallas. And with Cam Scadaboo, man, he looked good, scored a touchdown, and he has the chance to be the Giants' starting running back moving forward. But based on what he looked like in week 2, Cam Scadaboo needs to be rostered in your league, and there's still about 25% of leagues that he's available in. And then finally, Darnell Mooney, wide receiver of the Atlanta Falcons. Modest stat line in week 2, 2 catches, 20 yards on 4 targets. And he hasn't hit quite yet, but this might have ended up with the guy who drafted Mooney in your league straight up dropping him after week 2. And to me, that would be a mistake. Last year in 2024, he averaged over 12 PPR points per game, and Michael Penix is looking good through the first 2 games. To me, with Darnell Mooney, he is a top 40-ish level wide receiver that might have been dropped in your league. If he was, make sure you go fix that on the wire. But moving on to the number 1 waiver claim of the week, the number 1 guy I'm willing to spend all of my fab on, and there's evidence of that on YouTube. Bhayshul Tuten, running back of the Jacksonville Jaguars, rostered still in 48% of leagues, despite, the Tank Bigsby trade, obviously the buzz he received last week, still available in 52% of leagues. And guys, man, you see the graphic. 40+% of my fab is what I'd be willing to spend on him. And absolutely, if you have the number 1 waiver claim in your league, he is worthy of that spot. And like I said, man, I put my money where my mouth is. In the Flock League, again, maybe the waiver wire in our league is going to look a little more dry at running back than maybe in your league. A lot of these guys, they're rostering a ton of backup running backs. The running back waiver wire is very murky in that Flock League setting. So I saw Bhayshul Tuten available, and I said, listen, there's not going to be a singular other running back this year with the amount of upside that Bhayshul Tuten has moving forward. I took my shot, $93 bid. Again, sure, maybe you want to argue, okay, I could have bid $63. I could have bid actually $56 exactly here. But to me, when I'm looking at the situation, I didn't want to risk missing out on Bhayshul Tuten, and I was comfortable at the end of the day spending what I needed to go and get this guy on my team. If you're watching this and Bhayshul Tuten is available in your league, make sure you bid what you're comfortable spending on him. And to me, that was my entire budget because he saw his workload expand in week 2, and he has flourished with the opportunity he got in that week 2 game against Cincinnati. 25% of the snaps, 31% of the rushing attempts, and 33% targets per route run. When he was on the field, he was commanding receiving volume. He obviously scored that receiving touchdown. And overall, he just looked really good in that game against Cincinnati. And we actually have these metrics per data Roma here, but with Bhayshul Tuten in week 2 on a per touch basis, he was number 5 in yards per touch at the position. He was number 4 in missed tackles forced per touch, and he was number 6 in explosives generated per touch in week 2. Based off what we heard in the offseason, James Gladstone, when he was hired by the Jaguars, made a whole pitch for why he wanted Bhayshul Tuten in the draft. They acquire him. They trade away Tank Bigsby. He sees his workload expand in week 2. To me, if he keeps on this trajectory, man, he will be the starting running back at some point this year. No disrespect to Travis Etienne. He clearly has the workload right now, man. But Bhayshul Tuten is special, and if he is this year's Bucky Irving, I do not want him to be available on the wire. The fact that he's still available in over 50%, man, If he's available in yours, go and scoop Bhayshul Tuten. 40+% general number that I have out there, but bid what you think you have to in order to get him. Coming in at number 2, we got Troy Franklin, wide receiver of the Denver Broncos, rostered in 8% of leagues. A guy that I'd be willing to spend, 30 to 40% of my fab on, and a guy that is worth your number 1 waiver priority this week. With Troy Franklin, he played 83% of the Broncos snaps, and he earned 9 targets in that game from Bo Nix in week 2. 22.9 PPR points, and he's attached to a quarterback that he has experience with for the last couple of years. 2023, Oregon Ducks. Who was the wide receiver 1 for Bo Nix? That was Troy Franklin. Over 1,300 receiving yards in that season. And while in year 1 he got off to a slow start, we are seeing the Troy Franklin that we loved as a prospect truly materialize with his college quarterback. I get it. Courtland Sutton, he is still the number 1 wide receiver here. Do not get me wrong. But with the way that Evan Ingram has looked, he doesn't look very good. RJ Harvey not really getting the coach's trust right now. And of course, Franklin straight up beating guys like, Marvin Mims, Pat Bryant to the usage, man. He's got the opportunity to be a top 2 target in this offense, and this is an offense that's thrown the ball 70 times in the first 2 games, and Franklin's currently commanding a 21.4% seasonal target share, and if he keeps on this playtime and production trajectory, we're talking about a solid wide receiver option moving forward, with the upside to straight up pass Sutton if days like Sunday happen more going forward. 6'2", 4.41 speed, and like I said, very, very productive in college. Simply do not overthink it. To me, when I'm looking at Troy Franklin, I view him very similarly to how Quentin Johnston was viewed on the wire last week. Coming in at number 3, we got Elic Ayomanor, wide receiver of the Tennessee Titans. And he's not quite a full snap player just yet, but he passed the eye test, man. Sick one-handed grab, scores a touchdown in this game. And the grand total of 4 catches, 56 receiving yards, and 1 touchdown on 6 targets, man. He just simply looked good in this game. He has 1 less target through 2 games than Calvin Ridley, and it's very clear he's established himself as the number 2 wide receiver in this offense. Cam Ward, he's going to continue to get better. And with what Ayomanor has shown thus far, who's to say he doesn't eventually supplant Ridley? Like I said with Troy Franklin, what if he eventually supplants Courtland Sutton? I think it's more likely that Ayomanor would supplant Calvin Ridley than Troy Franklin supplant Courtland Sutton. But when we're looking at it, like I said, already has a developed rapport with Cam Ward. Cam Ward is only going to continue to get better. And I liked Elic the prospect, man. He was a top 7 wide receiver for me in the class. Yes, he slipped to day 3, but like Franklin, I thought the prospect profile was a lot better than what the draft capital indicated. Coming in at number 4, we got Cedric Tillman, wide receiver of the Cleveland Browns, and he's played on 88+% of the snaps in each of the last 2 games, and he scored in both of those games. With Joe Flacco under center, we are getting the wide receiver 2 for a pass-happy Browns offense, and while he hasn't been too efficient to start the season, we have evidence that he can be an efficient player in the NFL. We saw what Cedric Tillman did prior to his concussions last year to know that he can actually be efficient on the volume that he's currently receiving. The biggest question mark I have is the offensive potential. Browns probably a bottom 3 level offense in the league. But we trust the volume and we trust the ability of Cedric Tillman, and I think he needs to be viewed as a top 48 wide receiver rest of the season. Going on to number 5, we got Wan'Dale Robinson, wide receiver of the New York Giants, and the level of play that we have currently seen from Wan'Dale Robinson couldn't be the polar opposite from what we've seen last year. He was, a low ADOT, uneventful player in 2024, and he's operated more in that vertical slot, Tyler Lockett-esque role in this shot-based offense with Russell Wilson taking over. And to me, that role alone makes Wan'Dale Robinson an interesting target in fantasy football. In the first 2 games, 27% target share, 27% of the team air yards, and 33% of the Giants' end zone targets. And more notably, a 10.7 ADOT so far this year. And that is, like I said, very, very notable. Last season, 5.5 ADOT, we are getting Wan'Dale Robinson usage down the field, which is exactly what we need in the context of this offense. Like I said, Russell Wilson, he's willing to throw the football down the field. Wan'Dale Robinson, he's fast. If you can actually get him behind like he showed against the Dallas Cowboys, he actually has the speed to be able to make big plays down the field. So the fact of the matter is, him being in a more vertical-based role has actually unlocked a ton of upside that he simply did not have last year. When I'm looking at Wan'Dale Robinson, I'm looking at the wide receiver 8 through 2 weeks for, like I said, a quarterback that is willing to take chances. That is the big difference in this offense. No Daniel Jones, no Tommy DeVito. Like Russell Wilson will stand in the pocket and for better or worse, rip the ball down the field. So with Wan'Dale Robinson, If he's running more routes on the field, if he's making plays down the field, I think there's the upside for him to be a wide receiver 3 rest of the season. Again, I'm not going to rank him there just yet. We only have a 2-week sample size, but I definitely think he's worth a top 5 claim this week, and a guy I'd be willing to spend upwards of 10 to 15% on. Like I said, wide receiver 8 in fantasy so far, and he is the number 5 waiver claim this week. Kind of goes to show you that when your name's Wan'Dale Robinson, people are going to stigmatize you regardless. Coming in at 6, we got Romeo Doubs, wide receiver of the Green Bay Packers. And while the Packers are still in a wide receiver rotation for snaps, with the Jaden Reed shoulder injury news and the subsequent announcement that he'll miss 6 to 8 weeks, fire up the Romeo Doubs in your fantasy league. Yes, 76% of the routes, we typically want him to be, an 80, 85+% route player. But he is actually the number 1 Green Bay wide receiver in usage. And I think he has deep league flex appeal going forward. Because Matthew Golden, he still hasn't earned a full role. He still hasn't earned LaFleur's trust. Obviously, Dontavian Wicks, his hands has kept him from being a full-time player. And Malik Heath is simply a depth option at this point. With Romeo Doubs, if you need wide receiver depth, he is a very fine option. A guy I'd be willing to spend 10 to 15% on if the wide receiver options on the waiver wire are really dry. Next up at 7, we got Tyler Allgeier, running back of the Atlanta Falcons. And I saw he dipped below the 50% rostered line, but he is one of the premier handcuffs in fantasy, and I think he needs to be rostered in every league. And he showed that a little bit on display against Minnesota. Again, I'm not going to translate the workload he saw against Minnesota and say that's what he's going to do every week. We know Bijan Robinson's going to be the workhorse here, but he showed you what he's capable of. 16 carries in this game, 4.75 yards per carry. And of course, we saw what he did as a rookie. He was a workhorse running back for the Falcons the year prior to them drafting Bijan Robinson. If Bijan Robinson were to ever get hurt, were to ever miss time this year, Tyler Allgeier is an all-year fab level acquisition pickup. Stashing that type of upside for a fraction of the cost, you might be able to get Tyler Allgeier. I have 10 to 15% listed here, but you might even be able to get him for 5 to 10%. Next up at 8, we got Hunter Renfrow, wide receiver of the Carolina Panthers, and he should only really be relevant while Jalen Coker is out of the lineup. Jalen Coker on IR right now, not expected to return until week 5. But for now, Hunter Renfrow, this is real, man. 9 targets, 7 receptions, 48 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns, and he played 81% of the snaps for the Panthers this week. He is clearly the teardrop. To me, the top 7 waiver options very clearly above Hunter Renfrow, but he represents, in my opinion, a solid pivot. Maybe you had, guys like Xavier Worthy, dislocated shoulder. Jaden Reed, obviously the shoulder injury he suffered on Thursday as well. If you had one of those guys and now you have an extra roster spot, I think you do a lot worse than Hunter Renfrow because, like I said, the usage is there, the snaps are there, and the volume's also going to be there. 90 Bryce passing attempts. Given the status of this current Panthers team, they're going to be passing a lot from behind, and I think Hunter Renfrow has the opportunity to really soak targets. Coming in at 9, we got Woody Marks, running back of the Houston Texans, and he flashed big play upside in that game on Monday Night Football, that 37-yard reception out of the backfield, and he's a contingent play should Nick Chubb wear down in the immediate future. With Nick Chubb, he's been fine so far, but Woody Marks really carved out a significant role in this backfield. 27% of the team snaps and 3 of the 4 snaps in the 2-minute drill. Realistically, it's apparent right now, Marks, he's the one in the backfield with the juice. Obviously, Nick Chubb not having much juice at this point in his career. The O-line just isn't getting much push up front. Why play Nick Chubb at this point? Play the running back that can make people miss, generate big plays like Woody Marks can. And I think that could eventually happen sooner rather than later. So with Woody Marks, I think you can add him for cheap right now, 0 to 5% bid. But I would rather add him now because I know the cost is going to go up should Nick Chubb lose more snaps to him going forward. But moving on to number 10, we got Kyle Monangai, running back of the Chicago Bears. And it's a shared sentiment to what I feel about Woody Marks, a running back that has a little bit of upside, shown a little bit of good in spurts, and is behind a running back, DeAndre Swift, Nick Chubb, that is a replacement level starter at this point. With Kyle Monangai, yes, I understand. I'm not saying right now he is above DeAndre Swift in the pecking order. I'm not even going to say he's nipping on his heels. However, what the usage does indicate is that he is the clear RB2 ahead of Roschon Johnson right now. And with Monangai, man, he's big, doesn't turn the football over, a guy who didn't fumble a single time in college, and Ben Johnson already reportedly likes him. If he's able to wrestle the starting work away from DeAndre Swift, there's upside for this Bears offense to continue getting better as the season progresses. And like I said, Monangai kind of profiles in that David Montgomery type of role, given how much Ben Johnson likes him. But moving on to 3 streaming tight ends, we'll try to keep this rapid fire here. Juwan Johnson, 20 targets, 15.75 points per game through 2 weeks. And he is currently the number 1 tight end in the utilization report by Dwayne McFarland. He's operated as the number 2 weapon in this offense and has been the main end zone threat for Spencer Rattler. Number 2, Brenton Strange. He's run 78% of the Jaguars' routes so far, and he has 3+ receptions in back-to-back games. It is a tougher matchup in week 3 against Houston. but he's one of the few tight ends in the NFL right now whose role I actually trust in week 3. And the same applies to Ja'Tavion Sanders, tight end of the Carolina Panthers, 20% target share in week 2. And the aforementioned Bryce Young has been slinging the ball a ton. Like I said with Hunter Renfrow, 90 passing attempts through 2 games. And with Ja'Tavion Sanders, he's young, he's a talented tight end with a path to the number 2 target role in this offense. He's a worthy flyer going up against the Falcons in week 3. And now going on to the streaming quarterbacks, we start off with Michael Penix, obviously shredded the Buccaneers in week 1. Had that slower paced, low scoring game environment against Minnesota, but I think he has a get-right spot against Carolina. Going into this matchup, the Panthers just supported a 49-point game environment against the Cardinals, and I think there is positive regression for this Falcons passing offense. We love Drake London. Darnell Mooney should be even healthier, and we love Michael Penix to bounce back. Number 2, we got Daniel Jones. He's currently the quarterback 2 on the season, and now gets a Titans defense that was just absolutely obliterated by the Rams. With Daniel Jones, he's playing the best ball of his career, and the Colts have shown a willingness to use him on those quarterback sneaks. On the goal line, on the 1-yard line, we have seen Daniel Jones punch in 3 rushing touchdowns so far this year, and if he keeps doing what he's doing, man, we have to have the conversation about top 15 level quarterback for the rest of the season. Number 3 streaming quarterback, we got Tua Tagovailoa of the Miami Dolphins, and Fins fans can finally take a sigh of relief. Tua Tagovailoa passing offense looked a lot better in week 2, and now gets a Buffalo passing D that can be thrown on. We saw in week 1, obviously Baltimore better passing offense than Miami, but an 81-point game environment was supported in that game. Thursday night game, so maybe you prefer the first 2 options, but even still, the Dolphins should be in position to throw, given they are 12.5-point implied underdogs. But now the streaming defensive options, we got the Seahawks defense going up against the New Orleans Saints at home. Saints only implied for 17 points this week, and the Seahawks defense has played very well in each of the first 2 weeks. They're only 24% rostered, and they are currently the defense 2 in fantasy right now. Bucs defense going up against the Jets, 19 implied Jets points at home, and potentially no Justin Fields for this game after the concussion he suffered in week 2. Yes, the Bucs defense, it's not great overall, but the Jets offense with Tyrod Taylor might very well be the worst in the league. And a pin-back Buccaneers pass rush going up against Tyrod Taylor sounds like a recipe for fantasy points. Finally, the Falcons defense going up against the Panthers on the road. The Falcons just had a monster performance against the Vikings in week 2, and now get a mistake-prone Panthers offense. Panthers only implied for 19 home points, and the Atlanta pass rush just had 6 sacks in week 2. Bryce Young himself took 3 sacks in week 2. And now running through the 5 droppable players of the week, Ollie Gordon of the Miami Dolphins, he only played on 12% of their snaps, only got 2 touches, and it is very clear that Devon Achane is the workhorse in Miami. Tank Bigsby, he's still rostered in 41% of leagues. He got 0 offensive snaps in his Eagles debut in week 2. Marvin Mims, only 36% of the snaps, and it is clear that Troy Franklin is the new wide receiver 2 for Denver moving forward. Kenny Gainwell, Jaylen Warren, clearly their guy in week 2. And Gainwell, while he gets a lot of snaps, doesn't really see too many touches in the context of the Steelers offense. Next up, CJ Stroud. I mean, the offense looks like a train wreck, and Stroud just simply doesn't look like his rookie year self. He's rostered in 71% of leagues, and I view him as a back-end quarterback 2, high-end quarterback 3 rest of season. If you're in a 1-quarterback league, he should not be rostered at this point. But either way, if you guys enjoyed, make sure you leave a like down below. I referenced my rankings in this video. If you guys want access to all of them moving forward, head on over to flockfantasy.com, use promo code FSE, go and get the season pass today. You guys will have access, like I said, weekly rankings moving forward, rest of season rankings on the site. We all have access to all of the tools, including the trade tools, the comparison tools, all of the 9 yards over on flockfantasy.com. Promo code FSE to get 30% off. But with that being said, peace out. Good luck on the waiver wire. Go get your targets. Let's eat.